doing human design and meeting different learners based on how they want to consume content is really important for me because really the reality is no one's going to ascend in your client journey if they don't actually consume the thing that they buy.
Welcome back to another case study episode. We're so excited to have Jamie Palmer, human design expert, here with us. Jamie, so excited to have you on the call. Why don't you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and your business?
Yeah, so I'm Jamie Palmer. I do human design for business. I also teach people how to leverage human design as a tool in their business through my certification program. I actually just published my second book
Oh,
today.
wow.
Yep.
Congratulations.
And so, yeah, I really like to help people, one, better understand their human design and then support them in building a business around their design rather than trying to fit their human design into an existing business model.
Oh my goodness. Where were you 10 years ago? Really? I love this. I can't wait to hear how you're using audio in this business.
Mm,
So, I guess talk to us a little bit about the first time you learned about private podcasts and just the concept of it. Because I know
mm,
it's not, I mean, I think we've helped make it a little bit more mainstream than it used to be, but it's not a commonly known thing. A lot of people don't know about private podcasts. So, when
mm.
did you first hear about it? And when did you decide this is what I can use this in my business?
I learned about it from Lindsay because in my other life before human design, I ran an agency and supported one of her many endeavors way back when in the Wayback Machine. And I heard about it back then. And ever since I started this new iteration of my business, we have in some form of another been using Hello Audio for just creating better course consumption. Because really, the reality is no one's going to ascend in your client journey if they don't actually consume the thing that we buy or the thing that they buy. And so we've leveraged it in every program since 2021.
Oh, yeah, one of the OGs that we're chatting with here. That's amazing. So you first started really with courses. I think that's probably one of the most common use case, and it's one
Mhm,
of the ones that I know now when we buy courses, I'm definitely looking for that because I've
mhm.
become so spoiled. So when you first did that with your courses, what was the reaction with your students? I'm curious because it's probably something they've never seen before. Do you remember or can you think back if you got feedback or what their reaction was?
I mean, I literally had somebody tell me yesterday, be like, "Oh my goodness, this is so amazing. I didn't even know this was a thing." So people love it because it makes it easy for them to listen on the go. And it makes it just like I love my learning platform, don't get me wrong. It's amazing. And being able to just go on your phone and click into whatever that podcast app creates this sort of frictionless experience for clients. And so they're always commenting, even if they show up live to the trainings or they go to the course live, they're able to like re listen again so easily from their phone in the car, picking up the kids, doing this thing in between. And so I just think for me, clients have been saying for years now how much easier it makes it for them to stay engaged in the course material. And I think that's really been the big thing for me because meeting different learners, doing human design and meeting different learners based on how they want to consume content is really important for me. And that's one of the things I actually pride myself on in this iteration of my business. Like we have audio for every single course. We have a lesson text for every single course. We have a video for every single thing. We have workbooks and worksheets and all these different aspects so that people can consume the content in whichever way suits them. And literally by design, if you know anything about human design, individual circuitry in human design is auditory in general. And
Mm,
that's about 23 of the 64 gates in the human design chart. So almost every person has some flavor of individual circuitry, which is auditory to begin with.
Wow, I
that's
didn't know
fascinating. I did not
that.
know that.
Have you noticed a pattern with, some of the overarching human design groupings of preferring audio or anything like that?
Mhm.
or
Yeah, I
anything
mean,
interesting?
there's several aspects in the chart we can look at to see how does one want to consume. And so it's circuitry, individual circuitry is auditory. There's two spots in the color level of a chart known as determination and environment, well, which are also auditory learners essentially or have like a preference on auditory versus say written or not. And so there is a fair amount of those people too that are coming into my world because oftentimes if you're studying human design, you want an individualized
Mm,
approach and you've tried to put yourself into the formula of online business and it hasn't worked. And so I find that I would say probably 50% of my people are auditory by design. Just takes it to the whole next level for them.
That's amazing. Have you
yeah.
noticed that your engagement rates have gone up? And have you noticed, like, after you decided to implement the private podcast in your courses, have you noticed that completion rates went up?
I don't notice a difference because we've always had it,
It's
right?
true.
So I literally do it for every workshop, every course, no
Wow.
matter how big or small, we offer it. And we have excellent consumption rates. We're upwards in the 80 to 90% for most of our programs. That's something I've worked really hard on to make sure that people do that. And it's not always on the learning platform that people consume.
Right.
Sometimes they're only on Hello Audio and they're not on the learning platform. And I think that's why we have had such good completion rates because we're meeting people where they are based on how they want to learn. Like we have certain students that just will read all the lesson text that's created. We have certain students that will only do the audio. We have certain students that will always show up live, right? And so I think it's more a byproduct of just making sure we're meeting everybody where they're at. And I think that really makes the difference in terms of the consumption rate. So obviously that plays a big role in my business. And I tried to one course I remember in 2022 I tried to not do an audio and everyone was like, "Jame, I need the audio." And I was like, "Okay, we'll make it." Right. And it's one other step, but you know, it's something that people have come to really appreciate in the way that I deliver in my organization. And so they think something's missing if it's not there. And
Mm.
kudos to you for making it so simple for people to interact with it, you know?
Yeah, that was definitely a goal of ours, because especially because it's different and unique and a unique way of consuming something, and so we have to make this as easy as possible, we're
Yep.
gonna lose people, and there's a bunch of stuff we can't control that have to do with all the podcast players and all the
Exactly.
things, so
Yeah.
it's definitely not a perfect ecosystem for us, but, we that was always front and center in our mind to make it as easy as possible for you too, as the business owner, to
Yep.
just be like, no-brainer to add this to everything, right? Make
Yeah.
that the addition part as easy as possible. That is, like, one of the forefront, I think, pieces of, or like values, I think, in our product is just like, how can we make it easier? How can we make it so much easier to get audio in courses?
Yeah.
I appreciate you saying that.
Yep.
So I'm curious. I know we talked a long time ago about some unique things that you were
Yep.
going to do with the feed, and especially
Yeah.
like human design. For those of you listening who maybe haven't gone down that rabbit hole yet, there are other people that are like, yeah, I want her to talk about manifesting generators and all the things. But and you've created this really cool framework. PS, like everyone who's listening will definitely link to your IG, all related to like how you are as a business owner and how it relates to your chart. But yeah, there's a lot of content and different parts. Like when you were talking about colors, I was like, I've never even heard that before. So it's a lot of content. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious if you want to share a little bit about how past maybe some of the course feeds that you've done, how you are also using the product, if you're doing it in like lead magnets. I can't remember exactly. So if you want to walk us through maybe some of your unique feeds that you have.
Yeah. So one of the things that a lot of people do in the human design space is they make these written snapshots
Mm,
and they write this thing about your type and your profile and your gates and your centers and your this and your that. And that's great, but they're often kind of generic, right? Because you're just copying and pasting for every person's everything. And not everybody's enjoys reading that, right? We found that we would have like a 50-50%. If somebody had a written snapshot, some people would never even download it. We write this custom thing for them and they wouldn't even open it, right? And so I had this idea and I messaged you about it. I was like, because I'm looking at the ecosystem of it over there. So there's 3 configurations of the 9 centers. There's 5 types, 12 profiles. 8 authorities, 6 definitions, and 64 gates.
It's a lot.
And
It's a
that's
lot.
not even like the color level or the incarnation cross level, right? So there's another
Mhm.
level that's deeper than that. So what I've done, it was a major project and I'm still continually adding to it because as new people come in, I record new. But essentially, we've recorded individual audios for every single one of those parts of the chart.
Wow.
And then somebody gives me their chart and we take whatever applies to them and we put it on a customized to them private podcast feed. And
Yes,
people go crazy over it because
I
every
bet.
single part of it is completely tailored to them.
That's
I
so
love
cool.
this.
I remember talking to you about ways to automate that, and it was a
Mhm.
little complicated. I think that was where our conversation was. I was like, "Could we do tagging?" Ooh, I don't know. Like, there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah.
But even still, like, we did design Hello Audio where you can, like, duplicate an episode to a new feed if
Yeah.
it sounds like that's probably what you're doing. So there is some manual lift, but what a cool way to get a reading,
Yeah.
and then you have it. There is something really special, I think, about audio living in a podcast player that is very different than a text send out of your thing. I think about all the like readings I've had done by friends and over time, and they've sent me stuff. And it's like, still at the end of the day, I don't really have access to that. I don't remember where it ended up. And a lot of them are just calls, which is just like, hey, like I'm going to comb through, but you're giving
Yeah.
this very systematic result. I know you can pay on some sites for, again, the text that I don't even know where it ends up. But
Yep.
there's something really portable about it being in your feed, and you can look up the gate or whatever, or when that person you're sitting down and
Yep.
someone else is into human design, you're like, oh yeah, let me check, right? I have my
Yep.
chart saved on my phone, but like
Yep.
that's just basic level, and since I'm not a pro, I don't even really know, right? But
Yeah.
that's really cool and sounds like a lot of work, but it does sound like a big payoff even for that amount of work, just
It has
based
been
on the
so much
uniqueness.
work, but I already have the content created
Yeah.
from my certification. So,
Yeah.
normally when I do a certification, it'll be an hour-long training on each part. So I just took the high level stuff and brought it
Mm,
down to 20 minutes and I gave the most applicable stuff in every single one of those. And then we also give like education around it too. So it's like, here's your profile, but here's what profile means. Like, here's the
mm,
importance of profile. So the way that we have it structured, and we do touch every one of them, right? So there's a basic feed that everybody gets that has all the definitions of all the different parts of the chart. And then we just go through in the giant list of audios that we have and just select what applies to that person and then copy it over. So it's not that much work once everything is recorded. The next iteration that we're working on is actually cleaning up all of those transcriptions and
mm.
putting them as descriptions as well inside of the podcast feed so that people can either read it if you want to just do like a quick check of it, as well as the audio part. So at some point, we'll have that iteration, but it's been a labor of love, but I look at it as a long term effort in my.
Yeah, there's something you said at the beginning that I think you're being very strategic about. You said as new people come in, so there's a new one you haven't recorded, you record it versus
Mhm.
giving yourself this mountain of recording, right? So that's also, I think, a unique way of looking at it. And it's kind of reminding me of the Q&A feeds a little bit. Like it's this ongoing developing feed that once you put the work in, it's huge. And then the other thought I had, I don't think you could do this as easily in any other medium. Maybe text, but definitely not video. If you
No.
needed to make a video
Mm.
course for every individual client that you did a reading for, let's say, if that was your business potentially, it would take so much more
Mhm.
effort to pull those videos, put them in a course platform, and then also give the person access. And then also you have the friction of are they even going to log in and look at it? And that's what I think of when I think of getting these kind of readings. And it's, yeah, the audio piece in a feed just makes it that much more accessible for both you and the customer. So
Yeah, and
kudos
and
to
the
you for taking that risk
thank
of trying something like this
yeah,
because it's
thank
big.
you. Thank you. And I think that one of the things is like we started selling this product I think back in 2022. I still have clients that go and they re-listen to things and they come to me and like, "Oh, I had this thing going on. I listened to this and I had this aha." Like this by far I would say that the people who actually do engage, do listen, that's probably outside of like my two kind of HD Your Biz and HD Wild programs, the one of the ones that I get some of the best feedback on because it's such a thing. Like as
Yeah.
you live your experience, you hear things again in a different way and you're like, I wonder where that's coming from in my chart. And you go back and you re-listen and it's all right there. You don't have to go search for it or find it or log in or anything like that. It's just all right there. And it's honestly been a very cool tool in my
I'm like, "How do we
ecosystem.
scale this for you?" Because I'm like, "I want one." But
No.
this is a lot of work, but at the same time, yeah, once it's done, that's exactly what it is. It's a reference. I know the people that have the human design books on their bookshelf and they're all the like things are flagged and stuff,
Mhm.
but yeah, there's something cool about what we always talk about with audio is you can pop it in and listen while you're doing something else.
Mhm.
Sitting
Yep.
down and like studying your human design and grabbing the book and opening it and reading it is you have to have a certain space for that,
Yep.
right? Your toddler's probably not invited.
Yeah.
Crawling all over you. That's at least my life right now, but yeah.
I think that's like degrees of interest too.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
Like I think there are some people that like, I want to study human design. I want to use this in my business. And that's one ecosystem of a person. But I would contend most people just want to understand how I can
Themselves.
use my human design for me.
Yeah.
And so we make it the human design industry, if you will, makes it really hard for people to do that. Like you need a
Mm.
translator to translate
Yes, you
half
need
the
someone to tell
human.
you. Exactly.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and for me, it's this is about making it accessible so that people the reason why I started this journey is that so more people can get back to the nature of who they are, right? And I people are kind of like, "Oh, you're crazy for developing that product or some of these other things that I've developed that aren't necessarily business related or that
Mm.
related." And it's like, well, not everybody's going to want to come to me and take a business course or this course. And even if they do want to take that, they still need this other piece. They still need this piece of understanding the whole of their design. Because
Mm.
you get people who come into, or I get people who come into the HD or Biz program, and they're so used to doing things in a certain way, and they're still shooting themselves, and they're still in that place of the not self. And it's then they get to the end of the HD or Biz course and like, well, nothing's changed. And it's because you're still not aligned to your design. And so that's also part of why I created this. It's like twofold. It's a more of a retail product, but
Mm.
it's also very beneficial for me in supporting people along the way. Cause it's like, did you listen to this Gates alignment? Because it sounds like you're on alignment in this one. Go check that one out. And so it's a resource tool. So I'm also not constantly repeating myself as well.
This reminds me of Adrian's episode where it's like the way that you support people in the product itself is actually how you get them the results as well.
Mhm.
Like they have to be able to understand
Yeah.
their design in order to apply the human design for business. And so it's like
Yep.
you're like living out the values and like attracting the
Mhm.
right customers and students that will get results if they have access to that other type of feed, basically, is what you're saying. Like that they're
Yep.
able to learn that stuff well. And that's true. I could totally see that as a big blocker because it is intimidating, like getting into
Mhm.
your own chart. It feels like there's always something you don't really know or you
Mhm.
haven't explored yet. And
Mhm.
so if as long as you make that at least seem within reach, right?
Mhm.
It's possible to take in some information even if you don't become an expert per se, but that you could learn enough. And I think that accessibility piece is probably huge in that aspect, just because it can be very overwhelming. Like, here's a 800-page book. Like, I'm here to support you. Let me know if you have questions. That's not going to work. Yeah.
Yeah. I think too, for me, in this iteration of my business, I really focused on what's future Jamie gonna thank me for. I want products that in my ecosystem that have longevity. I have no interest in creating any assets in my business at this point in time that aren't going to continue to pay me dividends and ROI down the road. And so everything I'm making, it's like it's here to be here long term, you
Mm.
know? And it served me well because when we SEO things or we create a new book or whatever it is, it just brings more people into the ecosystem, right? And so there's not like an expiration date on it, which is nice. And it's not something where I'm constantly on this hamster wheel of having to relaunch another thing or whatever, because almost, I mean, everything's pretty much evergreen these days.
Nice.
And this is something important here. So that is applicable to anyone who's listening with any kind of business. And I think it's the fact that you've created a digital library of your assets. And
Mm.
and I don't know if you're doing this technically, meaning I don't know if you have all of the permutations, for lack of a better way of saying it, but like all the audios for every possible human
Yep.
design, difference in one feed, and then you're able to pick and choose and then copy from there. But it's essentially creating your knowledge library in one feed, and then you're
Yep.
able to pick and choose and tailor or customize or personalize, which is, we know that's the trend, right? That's where we're headed is
Yep.
people want, and this is inherently personal, right? Because it's your human design. But in business, that trend is coming, and you're able to then take
Mm.
all of your assets, so your knowledge management base, and be able to tailor that to someone and stick it in a personal feed for them. That's huge, and it's a way that that asset library just lives on. And to your point, it's an evergreen library that can then be tailored to that person's individual needs. That's a big advantage for anyone who does this kind of work, for if you're creating knowledge assets for anyone, and they vary based on their needs. So I
Mhm.
think that's a big takeaway here too.
Yeah, I like that. It reminds me, I think Erin Lindstrom's episode, which was pretty early,
Yes.
referenced, she talked about she made sure even products she doesn't sell anymore are in there. And so she uses that as a way to gift it to a client, or like there's somebody who she's coaching somebody and, oh yeah, I have this section out of this module that I don't even teach anymore. Like, hey, listen to this. And it becomes, again, like you just said, Nora, this reference library of all the things she's created. A little, that's a little different than Jamie's, right? Because obviously human design and the bulk of that work is like this big thing. But Erin's been teaching sales for a really long
Mm.
time. So she has all this information in various ways that she's taught it. And it's a library that she literally can either whip up a freebie, hand over to a coaching client, put in another course, bonus it to somebody else. And it's just very, like you said, evergreen, I guess, in that way. And you're reusing stuff that's yours, which is probably, and I remember at the end of the convo, I was like, so everyone should basically have all their content in Hello Audio.
And
So they
hello.
have a library. She's like, yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much. I was like, great, as long as that's what you're
As
saying.
long as we're
But
clear.
it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
you've created this like audio reference library that now you can like concoct whatever. And you could probably wow somebody that you wanted to collaborate with or whatever
Mhm.
and be like, "Hey, I made this quick feed for you, like quick reading or
Yep.
whatever." That's pretty dope, right? That's gonna impress a lot of people, and I think that's good, right? And Nora's take too on the personalization piece, like totally where this space is going and where we're all headed, and so you're already like even ahead of it in that way too.
Yeah, and like I said, I have the training ecosystem in the business, which we have the library of everything in that
Mhm.
done. And then we have this whole thing, which is like part library, but also part customized. And I
Yeah.
think it's really powerful. Like I was talking to another client in the training, and she really has an astrological flair to her business, and she
Mhm.
does like transit reports. I was like, you could totally use Hello Audio for
Yes.
this, and it's you could have either the generic one, and then you could have a customized one. And I think that individualization piece really helps people, because then they don't have to sort through what doesn't apply
Yes,
to them.
that's so
Mhm.
true. I was actually gonna ask you in my head, I was like, I wonder what other businesses or sorry, like niches this could apply, and
Mhm.
astrology was absolutely one of them
Yeah.
because there's moving parts and there's a woman I follow who's actually lives kind of local to me, Elliot. She has a couple feeds and she like courses and stuff, and she was just talking about, yeah, you need to know where your Venus is in order to XYZ. Cause like
Mhm.
Venus is transiting into
Yeah.
Taurus or whatever. I don't know where my Venus is in my chart. I have to like go look it, right?
Yes.
But like, oh, if she just made
Yeah, so
right?
just
It's actually less, like, astrology is less than human design as far
yeah.
as all the ways you can put stuff together, but, like, it's pretty nuanced. It's not just, like, what's your sun sign,
Yep.
it's what planet is happening and moving into what house at a given time, but your planet,
Yep.
Nora, Venus, is in a different house or something than mine. I don't know. It's complicated, but I bet if she put in the effort, she could probably do something similar to you. That would be
Yep.
really cool.
And I think you could do it in the fitness industry. Think about it. Fitness, yoga,
Like, you
any
could construct exercise programs
yep.
based on what the person's working on, and you can put on so many I always thought that the, like, fitness thing is cool because once you know how to do a bicep curl, cool, but the coach telling you, "Remember to do X or remember to do Y," That's the audio piece. It's not
Yep.
needing to see it
Yep.
anymore. It's more the like coaching that's
Yep.
happening during the exercise. And that
And
headphones make sense. If you don't
and
have
the
to
way
look at a screen, that's huge at a gym.
And the way that you structure the content upload, it's not like you couldn't put like here are the 3 pictures to make sure you have your posture right. So to me, like I injured my ankle in 2022 and I bought this prehab app and it was so annoying. It kept signing me out. But they essentially it was like a audio feed video where they put it all in and I was like, "Oh my
Mhm.
goodness. They need hello audio. Like I just want to listen
Yeah.
because I
Yeah.
can't watch the video anyway and do the exercise." Right?
Exactly. And then you're like, how to get to the next
yeah.
exercise. Now you're like in between that time. Yeah.
Yeah.
100% agree.
And so, like, there's so many different industries where this individualized approach could work, especially if you're someone who's been been in it for a minute, right? Like, you've
Hmm.
got a body of work, right? And you're trying to coach it, teach it, guide it to someone else. All you need to know is where they're at.
Because I know you're helping businesses, like people incorporate this in business, right? So I
Mhm,
immediately think of, okay, what are my experiences? Because I've never had a company think about and be intentional about employees' human design and how that relates. But
mhm.
they'll look at Colby scores, they'll look at
Discs.
right
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
discs, all the things. But this is interesting in the sense too that if we use this as a tool, how much more insight that could, So
Mm,
even in that space
Yep.
where you're looking at the HR team and their hiring
the team.
plan
Yeah. Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yep.
being so Lindsay, I think I'm just really trying to justify the investment of getting all of our personal charts
Yeah.
done.
Let's do
Is
it.
a company investment. And I think
Yeah.
that's just the case
I
I'm
think you
making
and I are
here.
the generators and Derek's a projector, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I've had people look at us before, but it was like fast and in a call, not extensive. And I think the extensive piece is really cool.
Yeah. Oh, and I mean, like, you can look at team dynamics, partnership dynamics, like parenting. Like, I'm launching a
Mhm.
summer
Yes.
program for HDing your kids and your
Oh,
parenting
fun.
approach. So there's like so many different ways you can apply it. And I think in any industry, whatever industry that you're in, that individualized approach, if you can get that into your clients, and I'm a crazy person, you don't need to create like probably over 100 audios, right? You don't need to have it be that extensive, but if you are ever like repeating yourself in your business, those are places where you can start to think about how can I create an individualized feed for my client? And it doesn't have to have anything to do with human design.
100%. And yeah, that individualization is the thing that makes people, I think, really connected to the person that they're learning from too. Cause there's
Mhm.
something cool about being like, this is for me, right? Like
Mhm.
they took the
Yes.
time for me, which
Yep.
is very different than here's a course, find your numbers that correspond and read it, which is how the books are set up for sure.
And it's such a good, especially if you think about building an ecosystem in that client journey. At the
Mm,
onset of the relationship, if you can wow with that, like I've had a lot of people who have bought the audio snapshot and they're like blown away by how amazing it is. They buy one $111 product for me. And then they'll go on to buy a $7,500 one. And I don't even have to have a conversation with them because they're like
that's huge.
so wowed with their first experience that they move on. And they're like, thank you for this. This is so amazing. And I think that's really, for me, I think part of I put a very intentional effort around around those first experiences. And I think when we can do that in business, it really just sets a completely different tone for the relationship than what we're like used to, for lack of a better word, in the online space, you know?
Wow. This is so I'm curious. So you've done a lot on the implementation and delivery side. Have you dabbled in or thought about using it on the marketing side, more on like client attraction or
Mm.
generating clients in terms of private podcasts? Have you used it for like launch content or lead magnets, or is that something you've maybe thought about?
Like the only freebie that I currently do is just a free mini reading off my website if you get a chart. Every other low ticket thing that I offer is either a workshop or the book. The workshops we do all put on the
Yeah, they're already
private
there.
podcast. In fact, I just did what I'm calling a line experience, which explains, how the profiles in human design are like 1, 3, 2, 4.
Mhm.
So I did a line experience, which basically is a 1 hour explanation of each of the 6 lines. And we
Oh,
did it
wow.
entirely on Hello Audio and the private podcast feed. And people loved it because they didn't have to log in or figure out how to get into the learning platform and they could just listen. And it dripped out. We did one a day over 6 days it's been it's newer in my business, so I don't know how it's gonna convert long term, but I assume it will go well. We've gotten amazing feedback in it. So, and I think too, like, even if you're doing something longer, like traditional business advice would tell you, don't do this big, long, low ticket offer because then no one's going to consume it, right? That has not been my experience.
Oh,
Use.
people will consume things that they wanna learn about themselves.
Yeah, yeah,
100%.
that has
Yeah.
not been the experience. Like we had
Yeah.
all every day when we launched that, there was a solid couple dozen people that listened to the entire hour of the audio that was put out that
Mhm.
day.
Mhm.
And if that
Wow.
was on my learning platform only, there's no chance that would have happened. No chance.
That's very true.
No chance.
It's fascinating to me. I mean, I know we've had some folks come on and they've talked about some of the quizzes and some like assessments that people do. And so then they offer like
Mm.
tailored private audio feeds based on whatever their assessment results were, right? But
Mhm.
obviously not at this level. This takes that to an entirely new level. But I do, there's just something about being able to provide these customized, kind of tailored assets at scale
Mhm,
easily without,
Mhm.
what if they thought about doing this 7 years ago to 8 years
Mm.
ago, to be able to provide this would have
Mm.
taken a lot longer. And
Mhm.
sure, there's definitely not minimizing the amount of effort to create those
Mm.
initial 100 videos and, or audio and kind of moves all that forward. But this is just such a game changer in terms of how we serve.
mhm.
I think that that's a big thing too, that I'm thinking through all of your marketing too, as my brain
Yeah.
can't stop.
I
Yeah.
was like,
Yeah.
usually we end up coaching in some aspect. We're like, this should be a feed, but I feel like you just make everything a feed. So
Yeah,
it's
you're
like, you're
already on it.
probably good.
I I'm sorry, I do.
Yeah.
This is
See?
perfect.
Are you sitting on a secret one? That's when we ask people
Mhm.
too. Like, so you've created a lot of feeds. Is there one that you're like, oh, I kind of want to do this? You just haven't had the capacity or you haven't pulled the
Yeah,
trigger yet?
I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, so I have this my HD or Biz program, and part of what I am doing in the HD or Biz program, that was the first offer I launched into like human design and business endeavors, and it's what the book is based around. And I have this idea or this concept that I talk about, like, what's the ethos of your year?
Mm.
And based on what the ethos of your year is, based on your design, I'm like, if I recorded everything, we could make these into customized feeds based on whether you're in an experiment, experience, or foundation building year, and then only put the by design, what applies to you on that feed, which also would help with a lot of the piracy and stealing that I've also been
Oh,
experiencing because it would be totally tailored
mm,
to only what's available to that person. And so it would be like you come in, you take
mm.
the assessment, this is where you're at, you get all the audios that are related to that, and then you get all the stuff that only applies to your design. That's what
That's
I'm thinking about
good.
next. Not that I have a lot of bandwidth to do that right.
And that shit converts well at the end of the
Yeah, it
year and the
really
beginning of the
does.
year.
I
Anything
know.
around that kind of stuff, man.
Yeah.
I like it.
It's a 2025 project.
Cool. We will pay it. We will be on the lookout. That sounds fun. Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of cool things you could start to do now. Again, now that you have this asset library, you can go like this, angle, right? Like how to do your summer and take time off in this with your whatever. That's really
Yeah.
special.
If you
And
didn't have the asset library, it'd be a huge pain to develop it all. That's what I've spent the last 3 years doing
Mhm.
is writing
Mhm.
and developing programs and assets and
Mhm.
manuscript or manuals. And I'm like, now I just got to get it out there in as many ways as possible. And that's really
Yep.
been why I've been, how can we package this up in a different way to get it more accessible to more people, to just bring more people into the ecosystem? Because I look at it as
Totally.
I have, my goal is to have HD divisions. We'll have a parenting division, and the whole
Mm.
parenting course is only going on Hello Audio, right? And then
Mhm.
we've got, the business division and the training division and et cetera, et cetera. And I just think it's silly not to. It's silly
Yeah.
not to. Because if your people actually consume things,
Yep.
they're
Yep.
far more likely to buy the next thing.
And your people are multifaceted. They're parents who have businesses. Right? Like, yeah,
Yeah. They don't
totally.
have the capacity to sit there and just try to figure out and fiddle with getting on a learning platform because the password's this or whatever.
So
yeah.
you've built a lot of feeds in a lot of different ways. What have you learned along the way? Is there anything that you don't think has come up maybe in our conversations about, oh yeah, I wish I would have done this differently? Or like when I set out to make this library of content, maybe I tried to record everything all at once and then decided to just do it as I go. Is there any kind of tips from your experience of launching all these feeds in these different
Yeah,
capacities?
The individual one, the best thing I did with that is I did pre-orders for 4 months. So that for me was like, okay, I took like January, February, March of 2022 and I was just like, I'm just going to record
For
everything based
each
on
individual person and
yep.
oh, that's
Wow.
cool. Instead of going through like that, I like that. I like
Yeah,
that.
so it got me probably 70% of the way there in terms of that body of work recorded as we sell them. And admittedly, I probably don't market them nearly as much as I should or ought to. But, once or twice a week, I spend 3 hours recording whatever needs to be recorded. Everything's formalized already. So I
Mhm.
just need to pull up my document from my training and then I just hit the points so that everyone sounds similar. And then that's been the way that we've kind of started to fill. And I mean, and there's still probably 15% left of things that we haven't gotten, right? I haven't gotten a 5-2 person yet.
You guys have to buy this so you can
Yeah.
help her finish. If you're a 5'2" out there, I'm a 5'3", so I'm sorry about that.
Like pre-selling in that was probably the best idea. I think the other thing I do wish for my training programs, we just dump the transcripts in there for people.
Because now
It's a
you have to go
lot of
back and do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I do wish on the earlier ones we did that. I would say those are kind of the 2 big things that come up for me when I think
Yeah.
about that, but I have an awesome team and we just try to document everything so that it's like, if we forget where we're at, we can just pull
Ah,
up document, right?
I could see
Especially
that happening. Yeah.
especially if we're like not doing everything all in one swoop. I think that was probably those are the 2 pieces that come to mind for me.
Your human design must direct you to not want to do everything in one swoop. I
No.
could see some people wanting to be very methodical about that execution, and you having these holes is probably just like, yeah, that's totally fine.
No, there's a giant, like, you can see me look at it a couple of times. There's a giant like a whiteboard paper where I just wrote out every single recording on there and just slowly over time, we
Just
just keep checking them off. And you know what? For me in this business, like I said, I'm focused on what's future Jamie going to thank me for. And if future Jamie's not going to thank me for it, I'm not going to do it. And it's progress over perfection. Cause like I would be obsessed about making sure everything was right
Mm,
in my agency and perfect and therefore never do anything. And for me, I'm going to embrace my design, which is I'm going to experiment. Things aren't going to be perfect. I'm a 3-5-2 like you are, Lindsay. I'm just like, it's not going to be perfect. And we're going to
yeah,
experiment. We're going to have fun and it's going
that
to be
sounds right.
great and it's going to be awesome, but it's going to be perfect. And you can't expect perfection from me because that's not how I work by design. So if
Perfect.
that's going to make you crazy, go find somebody else, please.
There's a lot of people out there teaching this stuff. Yeah,
you
very
know?
cool.
Awesome.
Laura, do you want to take us home? This was a super fun conversation. I knew you had a cool feed and I couldn't wait to talk about it. And I was like, that actually was even cooler than I expected. Yeah, I'm excited. I hope this episode inspires people. I think it's our goal for sure to get people, yeah, just thinking about ways that they can use it in their business, even if it's not the same business or niche, but just like strategic, things that they could execute. And I know there's going to be people listening that light bulbs are just like firing 100%.
Good.
Awesome. And we'll make sure we have all the links to
Yes.
where we can find you and your book and everything below. So make sure to check that out.
Yeah, let's
All
help
right.
Jamie finish her last
Yes, we
15%
gotta
so people
round
have to
that
go buy
up.
that product. Yeah.
Get those things done. All right. So the last question that we ask all of our
Yeah.
guests that come on the show is that if there was a private podcast with your life's ramblings, what would
Mm.
it be called?
It would definitely be called Lessons from a Third Line, which is, third line, they're here to experiment through the lens of human design. They're often labeled as failures because they have a lot of trial and error. So I would share my third line wisdom of all of my experiences and call it Lessons from a Third Line.
So good. I actually feel like this is probably a product coming out because that's pretty
Yes,
good.
I think,
Or like a
I
podcast
think
series,
it definitely
maybe? I
should
don't
be.
know.
Yes.
Public podcast. Do you have
Yeah.
a public podcast?
I do.
You do? What's it called?
It's called HD Your Biz. I am not great at being consistent with it. So I go through periods where I'm really inspired and I'll push out like 8, 9, 10 episodes and then you won't hear
Nice.
from me for several months, but that's just how we roll.
Yeah, and that's okay. That works too. Still
Yep.
getting it out there, still creating that body of work, as we
Yep.
all know. Very cool.
Yep.
Well, thank you, Jamie, for coming. It was really nice chatting with you.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
And there you have it, audio heads. Another episode of Launch Your Private Podcast is in the books. I hope you're leaving today feeling even more ready to amplify your voice and connect with your audience in meaningful ways. The adventure continues in our next episode with even more insights, strategies, and inspiration to help you along your own private podcasting journey. Of course, make sure to check out helloaudio.fm to start your own private podcast. And remember, you've got amazing content that needs to be heard. So let's turn the volume up. Until next time.